We have arrived at the part of the luncheon that I'm sure you've all been waiting for. I realize that some of you are still enjoying your dessert, but I think we have to move ahead so that Gilles has as much time as we can give him this afternoon. I will make my formal introduction. It is my pleasure to introduce our 2022 Turnbull lecturer, Mr. Gilles Leclerc. Gilles joined the Canadian Space Agency as it was being created in 1989. He worked as a project engineer, manager, and then director in a variety of technology development, satellite communications, and international space programs. Between 1997 and 2000, Mr. Leclerc was posted to the Canadian Embassy in Paris as Counselor for Science, Technology, and Space Affairs, representing Canada at the European Space Agency. He became Director General Space Technologies in 2004, and for a 6-month period during 2013, he served as the 8th President of the Canadian Space Agency. Since 2010, Mr. Leclerc has led the CSA's Space Exploration Program, which encompasses Canada's participation in the International Space Station, space robotics, human spaceflight, life sciences, astronomy, and planetary missions. Mr. Leclerc is a member of the Canadian Aeronautics and Space Institute. Thank you. Our sister society, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and the Ordre des Ingénieurs du Québec. Gilles will formally retire from the CSA on the 18th of November, for those of you who were unsure of the date, as I was, the 18th of November. So we are very fortunate to have the privilege of hearing from him today. Gilles, over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, everyone. That's a bad start. Thank you. I prepared a speech, a written speech today, which I usually don't do because I mostly talk about programs. But given the occasion, being invited as a Turnbull lecturer, I wrote something. So I don't think I managed to give it much structure, so you could call it Ramblings of a soon-to-be former space explorer, but here we go. Usually the Turnbull lecture is reserved for an accomplished scientist, astronaut, or leader of industry. Looking at the list of lecturers, I saw the names of Gary Lindbergh, Ken Money, Joe McNally, John McDonnell, Steve McLean, John McNaughton, Bob Thirsk, Marie-Lucie Starak, and many others. The lecturer is said to be selected for his or her association with some significant achievement in the scientific or engineering fields of space and associated technologies. My association is more with people who did great things rather than my own personal scientific achievements. For example, looking further back in time to the list of distinguished people who gave the Turnbull lecture, for the year 1964, I found the name of Gerald Bull of McGill University. If you don't know Gerald Bull, he was a genius who pursued his vision of launching satellites using high-velocity guns. I consider him to be one of the mythical figures of the space program, even though he never launched any object in orbit. So one of my first direct associations with space started in the 1970s with amateur rocketry, just to show how ancient I am. At the time, the only location where we were legally allowed to test small rockets was the Space Research Corporation range on the Quebec-Vermont border, which was owned by Dr. Gerald Bull. So my association with space started with a bang and in the shadow of a much more famous Turnbull lecturer. That said, I'm here to share my personal random observations on 3 decades at the Canadian Space Agency. The changes I've witnessed from my position and perspective, so no crystal balling, no attempt to writing history or rewriting history. People like the late Lydia Dotto have done it much better than I could. So, topics. Introduction, check. Space program and the business of space, international cooperation, the science of space, the people of space, and conclusion. So these themes are interconnected. One feeds the other. One cannot thrive without the others. A space program and the business of space. So Michael Mankiewicz, is he here? One of our technical experts and one of the heroes of the James Webb Space Telescope, once asked me, what is the Canadian Space Program? So that's a good question. A simple generic answer is that a program is the sum of all the activities, projects, and operations you conduct under a set of objectives. Canada had a national space program long before we had a space agency. It took more than 30 years to create the space agency following a recommendation from the Chapman Report on the left back in 1967. One objective of the Chapman Report, a visionary but pragmatic document, was to create a national industry capable of responding to the needs of the nation in space. First and foremost, at the time, connecting the population. One trigger for the creation of the CSE was the need to coordinate and manage major projects, and one in particular, to manage Canada's contribution in response to President Reagan's invitation to join the US Space Station program, known as Freedom, then Alpha, then the International Space Station. The CSE was given a long-term space plan that included space station, RadarSat, a mobile communication satellite project, and space science. And when you look at it, when you half close your eyes, what we do now is still, space station, radar, missions, and so on. So again, it shows the vision that the founders of the space program had. Many countries have recently created their national space agency for the same reasons we had, to coordinate policy, to bring focus to missions, to international cooperation, and to promote the development of space. The most spectacular example of new space agency is probably the UAE, the United Arab Emirates Space Agency. They built a space program of their own in just a few years with astronauts, observation satellites, and a mission to Mars. Nowadays, one could say that Elon Musk has his own space program. And here at home, GHGSat, North Star, Mission Control have their own little space program. So we are reaching the crossroads in our space program many times. And I see Jean-Claude, we discussed the fact that many times we keep saying we're at the crossroads, but the crossroads is getting busier and busier. We face now the realities of new space. Easier access to space, acceleration of commercial space. New space itself is giving way to big volume space, where more players, more diverse, faster, and sometimes richer players than space agencies are getting into a new space race that has little to do with our grandfather's space program. As an interlude, talking about commercial space, this is how in the 80s and 90s we saw commercial space. For sale signs and companies' logos on spaceships. So government organizations will need to talk more and more about investments, about selling products rather than developing technologies, about results rather than processes, and add other tools in a toolbox made of traditional contracts, grants, and contributions. To this end, as mentioned by Lisa Campbell earlier during the conference, the CSA is adjusting its business support model with the creation of a space hub, a more client-focused approach for Canadian firms. However, before I move to international cooperation. However, this is not the end of a national space program. Even though the economy is becoming a strong and dynamic driver, there are still important roles for government and space agencies to play. Let's recognize that NASA played a transformational role in giving responsibilities to the private sector and refocusing its own investments. As a result, the return to the moon is creating the early stages of a lunar economy, pushing human activity and the global economic sphere into deep space. It's a new space age. Governments will continue supporting research, science, engaging in international collaboration, in addition to enabling the transition from institutional to commercial. So it's not only about the space economy, it's about the public good and the common good. The space domain grows increasingly accessible and crowded, so there is a growing need for all spacefaring nations to implement a broad global governance and rules of engagement that ensure a safe and sustainable environment that is supporting all the sectors, the civilian, military, commercial sectors in Earth orbit and now in deep space. International cooperation. Canada is recognized as a trusted partner because of past and present investments and because of our expertise in some key technologies. The credibility is something we can build on, but we cannot rest on our laurels, and punching above our weight can only last so long. Mark Gunno recently said that Canada is made for space. We have a great history, but it's the future that is important. And space is one of the most important investments for the future. Space remains an expensive endeavor. Cross-border partnerships allow us to invest together, to share risks, and collectively achieve greater results. Cooperation brings diversity, gives strength, and sparks innovation. In addition, an additional advantage benefit of international cooperation is that it forces you to up your game because you're under strain to be not merely adequate, but to excel in front of your partners, whether they are JAXA, ESA, NASA, and their subcontractors. There is a vibrant spirit of collaboration and teamwork across nations and across cultures that builds trust, respect, and friendships. I see it every day with the ISS program. After 22 years of continuous human presence in space aboard the ISS, and with the remarkably reliable and still essential robotic capabilities we're contributing to the station. And that's thanks to very dedicated people, not only at the agency, but with our contractors and with our friends at NASA and all the other partner agencies. The reason NASA trusted Canada not only to design and build Canadarm3 for the Lunar Gateway, but also to manage all external robotic operations is the technical, operational, and managerial confidence we have built over decades of close, integrated collaboration on the Shuttle Canadarm and on the Space Station Canadarm2. Canada was the first country to join the Lunar Gateway and one of the first to join the Artemis Accord. With 20 other nations, Canada is part of the Artemis program, the NASA-led international endeavor to return humanity to the surface of the moon. And one of our great, I think, successes is to have a Canadian fly on Artemis 2. This is going to be historic. Again, historic since the 1960s. Across the Atlantic, Canada has been a cooperating member of the European Space Agency for 43 years now. ESA is a true space co-op with 22 member states, 4 associate members, and 4 other cooperating states. Canada is still the only non-European nation around the table. The partnership model differs from NASA's in return for our financial contribution to programs of our choosing. Canadian companies worked directly with European contractors. That model has spun off beyond the framework of ESA and pollinated across European and Canadian missions. For the best examples is our radar missions. ERS-1 preceded RadarSat-1. We benefited from European experience with technologies, with operations. Then there was NVSAT, the advanced SAR, which helped us for RadarSat-2, Sentinel, and so on. In 2006, 14 space agencies, including the CSA, set up a forum to advance a global space strategy, the International Space Exploration Coordination Group, IASC. Together, we took the visionary step of elaborating a plan for peaceful robotic and human space exploration, focusing on destinations in the solar system where humans may one day live and work. CSA played an important role in the success of IASC and now chairs the group, which counts 27 member agencies around the world. Different models of space cooperation, bilateral, multilateral, help us reach all of our objectives in space. The collective work of industry, academia, and government has led, time and again, to innovative technologies and scientific progress. The science of space now. The James Webb Space Telescope is the largest space science project ever undertaken by CSA and by NASA, and it is one of our great achievements. You had the chance to hear about Webb by Dr. Neil Rowlands and Professor René Doyon yesterday, and you know how much of a challenge the project was. Looking at the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope on Christmas Day 2021 was nerve-wracking, and for many of us, and for me in particular. To be blunt, that project was quite a challenge to manage, a euphemism, if there ever was, with multiple design changes, cost overrun, stressed managers. But through all the challenges, the team was innovative, resilient, and courageous. The pride of seeing CSA's logo on the Ariane 5 fairing for a major historic science mission compensated the stress of the launch and commissioning, partly. It took a lot of vision from my predecessors, Mac Evans, David Kendall, John Hutchins at the NRC to make it happen. And we're just starting to see the result of this, the amazing science that is being produced by this time machine. I hope we can continue to do more of these ambitious cathedral building types of space projects. I made a quick calculation again. At $14 billion Canadian, the Webb Space Telescope will have cost $1 for each billion of light years it's observing. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Science is exploration, and space exploration is all about science. University scientists in academia and those working in government labs are still the ones pushing the limits of exploration. To echo the words of Thomas Zurbuchen, the also soon to be retired NASA Associate Administrator for the Science Directorate, curiosity-driven science outperforms all expectations regarding the usefulness of space. Basic science is at the heart of unbounded economic potential in ways we cannot imagine. The people of space now. I missed that one. Enjoy it. But by the way, right after astronauts, human spaceflight, the most popular, the number of hits, if you count that as useful, on social media is about astronomy at NASA. And I imagine because of James Webb in recent months, because it stirs the imagination. It's you've probably seen, like me, almost in real time, that image. You keep zooming and you keep seeing more and more galaxies as you zoom the image. The people of space. After more than 65 years into the space age, the debate between human exploration and robotic exploration continues. John Grunsfeld ex-NASA astronaut and ex-NASA chief scientist put it plainly. There is no such thing as robotic exploration. All exploration is human exploration. A robot, a rover, a spacecraft is just a tool. You've seen images of Paris, London, or Tokyo 1,000 times, but you still want to go there and experience it yourself. A robot cannot taste the wine. Another famous quote, I don't know who said that. But an astronaut program puts a human in space, and it puts a human face on space. Astronauts, whether government or private, continue to inspire people. The CSA Communications Group, and it's a compliment coming, because has been very smart, creative, and successful at raising awareness and promoting science and space learning, for example, with the Young Astronauts program. I've learned over the years that it's all about stories. Not only astronaut stories, it's about stories steeped in reality, in numbers, in the laws of physics, and in the joy of discovery. Where I see a very positive change also is in the science community. More space institute, more Canadian university departments getting involved in space. Scientists, in particular women, have become more active in sharing their science results, their enthusiasm, taking their place, and becoming engaged in the public arena and on social media. Here are three people with amazing personal stories, and you've probably seen them recently. Julie Belrose and Farah Alibé are two Canadians working at JPL. They both grew up in the Montreal area. Julie was the navigation chief on DART, the NASA probe that deflected an asteroid in a planetary defense test a month ago. Farah is a systems engineer who worked on InSight, Perseverance, and Ingenuity. Matthew Bamsey was the systems engineer on the DLR Eden ISS greenhouse in Antarctica, a facility that tests food production under harsh conditions. And Matt now works at the Canadian Space Agency on our space food production team. And by the way, all three were candidate astronauts. Another story about the people of space. That one comes from Bill Gerstenmaier, Associate Administrator for Human Exploration and Operations, a good friend of CSA. Those are words who told that story on his farewell message to his employees a couple of years ago. I remember, that's Bill Gerstenmaier talking. I remember when the Sesame Street cast and crew toured KSC before a shuttle launch. They toured and talked about the KSC shuttle. They talked to the shuttle tile technicians. The Sesame Street members told me that they thought that they were the only people in the world that had a passion and dedication to their work that transcended their own personal goals. After talking with our shuttle technicians, they were shocked to find a group that might be even more dedicated and passionate than they were. We live diversity in space exploration, and we all have a role to play to encourage and to enable diversity and inclusiveness for careers in space. It went too fast. Conclusion. The golden rule in any public presentation is to make sure that the audience can identify itself with what is presented, the infamous "what's in it for me." I might have broken that rule because obviously what I covered is based on personal experience, but I hope I managed to convey some of the things, how things have changed, how things have evolved, how things will remain the same, at least in the foreseeable future. From the Apollo generation to the Artemis generation, we've gone from the conquest of space to the business of space. Who would have imagined just 5 years ago that there would be a race to the moon between NASA's Space Launch System and the SpaceX Starship? But on the other hand, things that don't change, there is a moon race between two superpowers. We are now on the cusp of, before that, on the home front, let's talk about ourselves, about Canada. I've always said that there's nothing that Canada cannot do in space. We only have to make choices. We're now on the cusp of seeing a Canadian launch industry. University students can now design and build their own CubeSats. There is a new momentum on space-based solar power, on space mining. The CSA is defining major roles for Canada in deep space healthcare and food production. Two domains where the potential to generate benefits here on Earth is direct and enormous. The vision is Canadian medical experts becoming the ultimate doctors without borders. And after Canadarms, Canafarms. So I'll finish by saying, and again, it's cheap wisdom that I'm going to share, but take the long view, play the long game, think big, but be humble. Let's continue to build cathedrals, those impossible objects that you may not see finished in your lifetime, and never forget to tell your story.
Gilles is happy to take any questions, comments, reflections, compliments.
Insults.
So I'm sure that some of you in this room have memories that you'd like to share with him or that you'd like him to share with you that you know of. So by all means, we do have some time, and why not take advantage?
I'm not going to say who's going to fly on Artemis 2, by the way.
Bonjour Gilles.
Bonjour.
Ça va bien. Je voudrais dire que j'ai eu l'honneur de travailler sous le leadership de Gilles pendant de nombreuses années à l'Agence spatiale canadienne et que c'est, entre autres, grâce à Gilles que j'ai pu ensuite continuer ma carrière avec un retour aux études qui l'a beaucoup encouragé. Puis, j'ai terminé mon doctorat comme ça. Maintenant, je suis de retour à l'Agence spatiale canadienne dans un autre directorat, mais je voulais te remercier puis souhaiter bonne chance pour le futur.
Un grand merci. L'agence finit éventuellement par ramener les meilleurs. Donc c'est. Merci. Quelqu'un d'autre? Anyone else? People are still in awe. Oh oui, sorry.
Louis-Paul Bédard. Je voulais juste te remercier, Gilles, d'avoir eu un impact énorme sur ma carrière. Tu as été mon parrain de l'Ordre des ingénieurs et you also gave me a letter of reference which made me able to go study in the U.S. So thank you, Gilles. And as with Isabelle, I'm back at the agency as well.
Thank you. This is getting embarrassingly personal, but I greatly appreciate. Thank you.
Well, so it's only going to get more personal. Hi, Jill. Again, thank you for serving as an inspiration for the next generation. Perhaps you can share with us some stories of your highest highs and comparably also your lowest lows with the agency over the course of your storied career.
Some of those stories I cannot share, actually, because there's cabinet confidentiality. I don't like much to look at the past, but one big high that I'm not going to miss because I'm going to watch it is the launch of Artemis 1 and Artemis 2. We've been negotiating with NASA. I think it's, I don't want to single, maybe one. OSIRIS-REx. Steve McLean and then me for a short time, we met challenges to get that mission approved because it's so out of this world. I mean, participating in a NASA mission that's going to go collect a sample from an asteroid, bring it back to Earth, at a time in the where the political environment was not that easy. That was one of the great challenges. We're seeing, we're going to have the reward in the form of samples. In fact, more samples than we thought we would collect from Bennu next year. But again, it's the tribulations of a bureaucrat. I mean, it's our job to convince our masters to, and what I see is, with Lisa Campbell, with the world now realizing how important space is. I'm not saying that our job has become easier, but people know about space, and in great part, it's due to you. I mean, to the universities producing, more and more brilliant people. Hopefully, a sad story. I'm just going to do between brackets, a sad story. I was once thanked by high-level people at NASA because Canada was sending so many great planetary scientists. So that it's sad to hear, but on the other hand, it shows the quality of the people we form in Canada. But it's thanks to you, to industry, to the community, the space community, and the private companies. I mean, the new. I don't like new space, but it is new space. In fact, compared with old space. But these very dynamic companies, venture capital, the new environment, CDL, Creative Destructive Lab, the new philosophy, people not being scared to think big. So that Osiris Rex, was a high point. But you live. I mentioned the great success of James Webb. You live so many moments of depression. You see people being burned out on a project of that scale. So those are the very low lows are somewhat compensated by the breathtaking success of a complex program like James Webb. And you've heard, I mean, the number of potential failures that could have been just between the Earth and the Lagrange point. So you live and you end up, I'm not saying I'm a balanced person, but you end up balancing these very difficult moments with the extraordinary moments that only space, and I'm partial, only space projects can give you. And the thing that, there's the nature of the work. I mean, I came to the agency, I was willing to not being paid, the agency was just being created. And it's, you invest a lot of yourself, but you also get a lot from being involved in space. And again, the other high, I will say, is international collaboration. I think my colleagues also see that. The way, for example, we are integrated with NASA as a team for the operations of the International Space Station, the experiments we conduct, the generosity we see from our partners, and the friendship building that comes out of these big projects. Let's call them what they are. Another high, I might say, is my before I was the king of the universe, the geospace exploration. I started, in fact, on the application side with satellite communications, and the rewards there are as extraordinary as they are on the expert, because you get a feeling of what you achieve having real, tangible impact on people's lives. For the ANIC-F2 program, I remember actually sending some of our engineers in clinics, in schools in the north to install K-band terminals. And for the first time, I mean, these people were for the first time, they had access to internet, direct connections with the South for medical care. So, Gilles Leclerc is there. I mean, the images of ice flows in the Arctic actually help hunters determine if it's a good day or not to actually chase and or fish. So yeah, these are a few examples of the highs and lows, but I remember only the highs.
Yeah, I'm going to ask, with all the missions that you've tried to sell to the Canadian government and all the different political parties you've seen there, what's the best-selling argument to get a mission through in your...
Sorry, I didn't...
I said,
Can you repeat?
for all the mission you've tried to sell to the Canadian government and through all the different Canadian government you have to deal with, what's the best-selling argument to sell a mission?
Oh, wow. I'm going to need help from my colleagues. I think the best argument is if the minister himself is open, responsive to what you have to propose. And, we've tried, the benefits, the economic numbers, saying that, Canada is, we're losing ground in terms of space investments over GNP. Most people in governments are economists, but I don't think it sells to the politicians, even though some of them are economists. It's really the vignettes, the stories that really, in my mind, have an impact. I mean, saying that on the basis of one contract from STDP, a company was able to, gain hundreds of millions of dollars of business in non-space work. I mean, that is impressive. The personal stories, that also counts a lot, I mean, in selling space. But yeah, I agree. I mean, selling space, government has so many different priorities. And what we're seeing that, there's an economic downturn, inflation is important. It takes courageous people to invest in what is, government doesn't like risks, but everything we do in space is high risk. Like Captain Kirk famously said, our business is risk on this ship. So yeah, it takes courage. It takes long-term vision, but we managed to do it. The arguments can be scientific. If we have solid allies, it always comes back to, it's not the space agency itself. It's first and foremost the space community. I mean, universities, industry, government departments, when we all work together, I mean, we form a united front, and that's where we have the most success with government investments in space. And again, space is seen now as an investment. We're finally seeing, the economy, the space economy, for real. I mean, it used to be real, but it was on the service side, mostly with satellite communications. We see that economic sphere expanding in space. So, as I said originally, the space business is serious business. And it's not only reserved for nerds. And d'autres questions? Other questions? I don't know if my colleagues want to help me on that one, but and obviously it takes a great leader at the Canadian Space Agency, and you've heard Lisa Campbell on the first day of so it helps to have someone who has the ear of government, and us engineers and scientists can show passion, can show methodology and so on, but it's always good to have someone who speaks Ottawese and governmentese with passion and talent.
Hi, Gilles. So one of your concluding remarks was keep building those impossible objects that you will not see in your lifetime. I'm just curious as to what that represents for you. What's your cathedral, so to speak? Oh,
it's that, And again, I don't know if we're still going to build these cathedrals, because we cannot just look at the past and extrapolate or project, space station, talking about courage it took to get into that major endeavor, the James Webb Space Telescope. It's, the big science is still something that humanity and space agencies still need to invest into. The example of the cathedral is, related to the fact, even though we live in, faster, not cheaper, faster space, some major programs take years, and in the case of James Webb, decades to come to space. So you need to have that long-term commitment, the belief that what you're proposing one day is, after many, many years and probably many generations of scientists, engineers, technicians, that this is not only going to fly into space, but produce life-changing results. When you look at one of the great benefits of space, I mentioned astronomy. It's quite obvious, because when some of the older folks like me who were studying astronomy back in the previous century, our image of the world of the universe has completely been turned upside down, and it's the trials of discovery and the joy of discovery and the joy of realizing that, well, we did something important. Let's appreciate this silence.
Well, it's kind of hard to see that, but sorry. So
I don't see any raised hand or person.
I'll just take a minute, Gilles, to thank you, if I may. Excuse me. You may have had to. You may have had a career in space, and with space exploration, you're traveling millions and billions of miles. But to get here from the South Shore might have been just as much of a struggle, with as uncertain an outcome. Although I have to say, as I've mentioned a couple of times, driving from Ottawa to Montreal for the first time in a couple of years, I was astonished. I nearly got lost because it was so simple. Because it was, you come in along Highway 40, down to Highway 20, through the Turcotte Yards. It's as easy as pie, which really took me by surprise. And I was pretty sure I'd either wind up on the South Shore or back on Highway 40 or something, and the road just went straight downtown. So it's a much more accessible city now. But I don't know from the South Shore. I think it can still be difficult. We certainly were privileged today to share some time with Gilles as he approaches the end of his mission with the Canadian Space Agency. And on behalf of CASI and the people in this room, I would like to express our heartfelt thanks for your presence today, and from CASI's point of view, for being our liaison with the Canadian Space Agency for as long as I can remember. Your guidance and your input as to how we can best serve the interests of the Canadian space public, as well as the agency and the way the agency wanted itself to serve Canadians, has really helped us, I think, to stay reasonably on track in terms of what we're doing and making sure that we achieve our goal, which is to help everybody in the Canadian space sector achieve their goals. So I have a small token of appreciation. Some of you know the secret of this already. So this tome is called Space Launch System. It's a very, of course, the Space Launch System is a very large and complicated thing with many moving parts. So a very large volume of information is required to cover it. In fact, however, we're looking at a payload of a couple of bottles at the bottom. Now, I did a little snooping around, Gilles, and I understand you prefer red wine without sulfites. So this wine is guaranteed not to have that. So I'll bring that down for you later. I guess if I don't want to keep you up here unnecessarily during concluding remarks. I think Phil and Mick would like to come up and say a few concluding words, Gilles. So maybe we'll repair down there.
Thanks for the rocket fuel.
I couldn't think of a better way to end off the conference than with thanking Gilles Leclerc for his decades of service and you know, talking about what we do is building cathedrals. I mean, that's pretty inspiring, I think. And using those stories to kind of build, I think, to me is the meaning of this conference, right? It's the Canadian space community. I mean, we're all here for various reasons, but at the end of the day, we kind of build these relationships, share these stories, and that leads us to some great things. We're all tackling different kinds of problems from different angles. Sometimes we turn into each other over the years. Yeah, you know, we start as students and, you know, go become industry members, and then sometimes you want a retirement package, so then you go to government. Joking. But if you are looking for, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for kind of showing up in person this year. I think it's been a few years of not having this conference, and you know, sometimes we forget. You know, we're on our Zoom calls in our basement all the time, and then we see people in person, and we go like, oh yeah, we like each other. This is fun, and I think it's really been that. So thank you very much. And I didn't prepare a speech, obviously. I rarely do. So I'm going to hand it over to Phil for any of his.
I also didn't prepare anything. No, I think what I'd like to do is thank everybody for being a little bit vulnerable. You know, coming to an event like this, particularly after a few years of, like Mick said, being in our basement, it takes a lot of courage to come out to a conference like this. For many of the students, this is the first time many of you have ever given a technical presentation, and it takes a lot of guts. You know, and I think it also takes a lot of guts for people to show up here after a few years and maybe be a slightly different person than you were the last time you were here. I know that's certainly the case with me. You know, the last time I was at a CASI conference, I think I was in industry, and now I'm in academics, right? And so I think it's important that we be vulnerable with each other. It's important that we all come together in this community, and there's been a lot of talk about community here, the talk about engineers and scientists working together, talk of working with communities in the north, talk of improving participation of women and Indigenous people in space sciences and technology, and of course talk of the community that it takes to build these cathedrals that we heard from Gilles today. So I think conferences like this are an important step along the way. You'll be hearing a lot more from Mick and I in the coming years as we do more of these, but let's continue to support this, continue to support the community, and continue to support these in-person events, because I think we've all been reminded this week of how valuable this is. So thank you for your participation, and we look forward to CASI Astro 2023. Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much for your leadership this week. I'd like to thank our sponsors. You can see them across the bottom of the slide here. It takes money to put on a conference like this, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing for much longer. You know, CASI is pretty solid financially, but we can't be in the red forever, or someone's got to turn the lights out. So we really appreciate the support of our sponsors. We appreciate your support to pay the registration fees that are always awkward and difficult, but again, without those amounts of money, we wouldn't be able to do this, and it's for you. I think all has been said and all has been reflected upon. I can't really add anything to the wisdom and the information and the thoughtfulness that others have done today. What we would like to do is follow up on this event with a survey, a very brief one, with all of you, to ask what your thoughts are about the content and structure of this event and what we can do better or the same next time around that you would appreciate. And I guess with that, I'd like to say goodbye, and I hope I see you all again soon.